All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, most secretive industries in the world, management consulting.
I mean, think about it. It's a huge question, and it gets right to the heart of this massive global industry that's quietly shaping pretty much everything, from our healthcare system to government policies. And the answer? Well, it's a lot more complicated than you might think.
You've got these huge names, right? McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG. They're really at the top of the food chain. And their promise, on the surface, is pretty simple. They bring in the smartest people to solve the toughest problems. They offer expertise, efficiency, and that crucial outsider's perspective.
But here's the real kicker. What happens when that advice goes spectacularly wrong? Today, we're going to dig into the hidden influence and the sometimes disastrous consequences of the consulting world. We'll be looking at their own reports, deep dive research, and some incredible journalism to piece this story together. So let's get into it.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the promise. What's the big deal? Why are these firms in such unbelievably high demand?
So, in plain English, think of them as expert fixers. A company or a government has a problem it just can't seem to solve on its own. Maybe it's cutting costs, or trying to break into a new market, or a massive digital overhaul. So they call in the consultants to basically give them a roadmap. And the industry is basically run by a handful of giants. You have the super prestigious Big Three over here. They're known for their top-level, high-stakes corporate strategy stuff. And then you've got the Big Four, who actually started out in accounting but have since become these massive, diversified consulting powerhouses, too. And man, is that promise compelling? You take a company like U.S. Steel, this icon of American industry that's in decline, and you hire McKinsey to bring it back to its former glory? That's the sales pitch right there. We'll give you expert guidance that leads to a huge, triumphant turnaround.
But here's where the story takes a turn. This total reliance on outside experts, it can come with a staggering and often totally hidden cost. And look, this isn't just something happening inside big companies. Take a look at this trend in Finland, which pretty much reflects what's happening globally. Government spending on private consultants has just exploded. We're not just talking about buying a little advice here and there. This shows a fundamental change in how our governments actually work. The economist Mariana Mazzucato puts it in this brilliant and kind of scary way. She argues that this creates a really dangerous dependency. When you constantly outsource the important stuff, you're not just spending money. You are literally weakening your own organization from the inside out. You become, in her words, infantilized, totally unable to function without your expensive advisor. And this just creates a vicious cycle. The expertise you have in-house isn't just getting a little help, it's being totally replaced. Critics call this hollowing out. All that crucial experience-based knowledge, the gut instinct that comes from years of doing the job, it just vanishes. And pretty soon, the organization is addicted, totally unable to solve its own problems without signing another huge consulting contract. So you can see how this isn't just about money anymore. This dependency evolves into something much, much bigger. We're now getting into the murky territory of power and politics. Yeah, there's actually a word for this whole phenomenon, consultocracy. It describes a system where the logic of consultants starts to shape the very core of how governments work, often completely bypassing things like democratic processes and public accountability. So here's the crucial point. Hiring a consultant isn't always about finding the best solution. It can be an incredibly useful political move. Let's say you need some cover for a really controversial policy. Just hire a consultant to recommend it. Facing pushback from your own team? Bring in outsiders to force it through. And hey, if it all blows up in your face, well, you've got a convenient, well-paid scapegoat to blame. And with that much influence, often happening completely behind the scenes, it's really no surprise that these firms have found themselves at the center of some massive headline-grabbing scandals and catastrophic failures. I mean, this one is just devastating. You have McKinsey working with Purdue Pharma, and they literally came up with strategies to turbocharge the sales of OxyContin, even as the death toll from the opioid crisis was exploding. This advice led to massive legal settlements and did incredible damage to the firm's reputation. And then there's the whole question of who they're willing to work for. McKinsey's client list has raised serious ethical red flags. They've worked for authoritarian regimes like Saudi Arabia, and at one point, they produced a report that identified public critics of the government. Some of those critics were later arrested or had their families targeted. It's chilling. And the list of failures just keeps on going. They were deeply connected to the collapse of Enron. Their big turnaround plan for U.S. Steel didn't stop the decline of Gary, Indiana. At Disneyland, their recommendations to cut costs on maintenance were followed by tragic, fatal accidents. And their COVID-19 reopening plan for Miami-Dade County was so bad, it was basically laughed out of the room and scrapped immediately.
And check this out. It's not just about giving bad advice. The problems run deep, even into the core business of the Big Four, auditing. This recent data from U.S. regulators is just, well, it's shocking. Not a single one of the big firms met their quality targets, with KPMG having a failure rate of a staggering 50%. It raises some really fundamental questions about basic competence and oversight across the entire industry.
Okay, so when you put all of this together, the scandals, the spectacular failures, the huge ethical questions, you're left with this one giant nagging paradox at the heart of the whole consulting industry. Why in the world do businesses and governments keep hiring them? The answer, it seems, isn't just about needing expertise. It's about the powerful allure of legitimacy, of political cover, and maybe the simple fact that in a world that feels overwhelmingly complex, hiring an expert just feels like the safest thing to do. And that really leaves us with the big question for all of us. In a world this complicated, who should we be trusting to solve our biggest problems? Is it a tiny group of elite external advisors? Or should we be investing more in the knowledge and skills inside our own companies, our own communities, and our own public institutions? The answer is going to define who holds the power, and ultimately, who we hold accountable when things inevitably go wrong.